Okay, so in this problem, we're going to combine both producer surplus and consumer surplus. And our goal is to find the equilibrium price and quantity and see how that benefits both consumers and producers. Okay, so the first thing I would do is when I'm reading the problem, I would probably find all the supply stuff and then rewrite a supply function. Because if you look, both of the functions here, and I don't think I have a highlighter, both of the functions here, so here's the supply right here, and then here's the demand. They're both written as P equals, so I don't really like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the supply function to S of X, and I'm going to change the demand function to D of X, so that it's a little bit easier to understand what's going on. So if we read the supply function, remember that one's always got to have a positive slope because as price goes up, quantity supplied goes up. They have a direct relationship. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're reading through. So this says that the supply function is S of X, we're going to change it to 1/5 X squared. So we're going to write 1/5 X squared for the supply function. And then the demand function, that one is going to have the negative slope because as price goes up, quantity demanded goes down. And as you can see, that's the line right here. So I'm going to rewrite it as D of X equals negative 3X plus 50. And so the first thing you're being asked to do is you're asked to find the market price and quantity, which is called equilibrium. So at equilibrium, supply is equal to demand. Okay, so that literally means take the supply function and set it equal to the demand function and then solve for X. And then once you have X, you can plug that in to either the supply or the demand function because you should get the same answer. And that'll give you your equilibrium price. So your equilibrium quantity is going to be your X, and then your equilibrium price is going to be your Y value or whatever you get out of those. So your equilibrium price would be P up here, but it's basically what do I get when I plug X into the equations. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do exactly what it says here, and I'm going to set my supply function equal to my demand function, and then I'm going to solve for X. So it's a quadratic that also has a linear term and a constant term. So I'm going to set that equal to 0 because we're going to want to factor it. But I don't want to factor with a leading fraction, so I'm going to multiply everything by 5 to clear that. So I get X squared plus 15X minus 250 equals 0. And if I factor that, I get X plus 25 and X minus 10. So I get X equals negative 25 and X equals 10. Now, the negative isn't going to make any sense in this word problem because X is the number of bikes that are going to be sold in a day, and you obviously can't sell negative 25 bikes. So the market is going to be at equilibrium. Suppliers willing to supply and buyers willing to buy are going to be equal when the market quantity is 10 bikes. So buyers and sellers are going to be at equilibrium when X equals 10. Well, if X equals 10, we need to figure out the equilibrium price. So to do that, you could either do S of 10. Sorry, I'll keep my colors the same here. You could either do S of 10 and get 1/5 times 10 squared, which is 100 over 5, which is 20. And that's dollars because that's the price. Or you could do D of 10, whichever one's easier. You have to get the same answer because we're at equilibrium. So if you look, that's negative 30 plus 50, which is equal to 20. So the equilibrium or EQ price is $20. We also call that the market price. And then the equilibrium quantity is 10 bikes. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go down to our graph and put everything on there. So remember, price, let me see if I can, yeah, that should be good. I think you can see all that. So price goes on the y-axis and quantity goes on the x-axis. And we know that the market price is 20, and at that price, 10 bikes will be sold. So we want to graph the point 20, 10. So here's equilibrium, okay? And we got that from above. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to graph my line next, and I'll write that down here. So my line is d of x equals negative 3x plus 50. So lines, obviously, you just graph the y-intercept and then use the slope. But since my graph, it's actually in terms of 1, so we're actually good here. So we're going to go up to 50. That's my y-intercept. And then my slope is negative 3. But what I was trying to explain there was all of my tick marks are 5s. So going down 3 and over 1 isn't going to be the best thing I have to do. So what I'm going to do is just take this point and use a ruler and aim it at that point. So I'm just going to kind of go like this. And then the other thing you can do is you can put one more point on your graph. And so I want to pick something that when I subtract is going to give me something that's going to fit on my graph here. So what I did was I plugged in 15. And the only reason I'm picking 15 is because it gives me a number that ends in 5 or 0, because that's what my y-axis looks like. So what I did was I plugged in 15 and I got 5, right? Because you would get negative 45 plus 50. So I then graphed the point 15, 5, which is right here. And then what I did from there was I just connected these points. So what I was just trying to do there is just getting a nice graph. Okay, and I moved it right at the very end, of course. So let me do that one more time. So I'm just trying to get like a nice graph here. Okay. And then the second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to graph my parabola. And my parabola is s of x equals 1/5 x squared. Well, if I plug in 0, I get 0. So I can graph 0, 0. I know it has to go through equilibrium, which is right here. And so then what I did next is I plugged in another point so that I could get, kind of a nice looking graph. And so the other point, I want to be able to divide by 5. And so the other point I would plug in is, let's see, 15. And then if I plugged in 15, I would get s of 15 equals 1/5 times 15 squared. And so that's 225 divided by 5, which gives you 45. So this is 45. I can plot the point 15, 45, which is right here. And again, the only reason I'm doing that is so that I get like kind of a nice looking graph, right? You really only need 2 points if I'm being technical, but it's kind of nice to kind of have something to aim for after this. So we've got to kind of draw more of a curve on this one because it's a parabola, and then I'll make that look bigger so that it looks good. So here's my demand curve, so d of x, and here's s of x. And again, 15 doesn't mean anything in the problem. I just picked that because it was an easy point to graph. Okay, so the 15 I'm not getting from anywhere. I got that because that's what would fit on my graph nicely. The only number that we really got from doing any math was this equilibrium, where supply and demand are equal. Okay, and we did that in this first part. Now, remember, what we do now is we go over to the y-axis, and that's going to be my market price. So here's my market price or equilibrium price. And then down here is my equilibrium quantity or market quantity, however you want to call it. So I'm just going to call them both market because I think it makes it the easiest. Now remember, this is demand. So I'm willing to pay all of these different prices, right? That's what I'm willing to pay as a consumer. I only have to pay the market price. So this area in here is consumer surplus. So here's consumer surplus. Okay, I'm willing to pay everything up here, right? I'm willing to pay all of this, but I don't have to. I only have to pay the market price. Okay, so I was willing to pay anything up here, but I only have to pay the market price. So this is consumer surplus. Now, as a producer, I was willing to take any of these prices, okay, because this is the supply curve, all right? If they gave me $10, I'd be willing to produce 6 units. If they gave me $15, I'd be willing to produce 8 units. But guess what? That whole time, they were pumping out $20, right? So I'm going to shade this in, and this is my producer surplus. Okay, so I was willing to take money all the way down here, but they were paying me $20 the whole time for my stuff, but I was willing to take a lot less. So this area in here in pink is producer surplus. Okay, now if we're going to figure out this, you guys will have to flip your page on your notes. I'm going to set up the integrals. Actually, you know what? I'll take a screenshot. So let's do that. I'll take a screenshot of this and bring it onto my next page because that's actually super helpful. So I'll take that screenshot and I'll go ahead and paste it here. And then this is how we're going to set up our integrals because they want us to calculate both consumer and producer surplus. So consumer surplus is the area under the demand curve shaded in yellow, but above the market price. So consumer surplus is going to be equal to the integral from 0 to the market quantity, which of course I cut off those numbers. So let me go back up. That was 10. Okay, so I'll put a 10 here. That's my fault. So 0 to 10. The upper curve is the demand curve, so that's negative 3x plus 50. So that's the upper curve. And the lower curve of that area is the market price, so minus 20. So there's consumer surplus's integral. Okay? Now, producer surplus's integral is equal to integrate from 0 to 10, because we're trying to find this pink area. So we'll integrate from 0 to 10 of the upper curve is the market price, so 20, minus the lower curve is the supply curve, so minus 1/5 x squared dx. Okay, so now that you have those set up, it's just about taking the integrals. So if we take the integral of the consumer surplus, we would integrate from 0 to 10, and I'm just going to clean this up. That would be negative 3x plus 30 dx. So that would be negative 3x squared over 2 plus 30x. No c because this is a definite integral. And so we would put in 10 first. So negative 3 times 10 squared divided by 2 plus 30 times 10. And then when we plug in 0 to do the lower, we would get 0 plus 0. Okay, so you don't even have to do that part. 10 squared is 100, so this is negative 300 over 2 plus 300. And so that ends up being $150. So consumer surplus at the market price is $150. If we go ahead and do producer surplus now, we would get, and I don't need to clean this up, so I'm just going to integrate. So it would be 20x minus 1/5. The integral or antiderivative of x squared is x cubed divided by 3. Again, no plus c because this is a definite integral. And so we get 20x minus x cubed over 15. And we're going to evaluate that from 0 to 10. So again, upper minus lower. So 20 times 10 minus 10 cubed over 15. So that's upper minus lower. If you plug in 0, you're going to get 0 minus 0. So this ends up being $133.33. So consumer surplus is $150 and producer surplus is $133.33. So at the price of, I think it was $20. Yeah, at the market price of $20, total consumer surplus is $150 and total producer surplus is $133.33.